If you want to learn how to stop bailing out your adult kid and have a healthy relationship, this episode is for you. We are speaking with Kim Muench, parenting coach. She's going to talk to you about how to have peace instead of a power struggle while you're trying to launch those adult kids.
You will get so much out of this episode. Well said, Kelly. Let's get to it. All right, welcome to the Fit Over 50 Life podcast. I'm your host, Mark Patrick, and that lovely lady next to me, Kelly, raise your hand in case they can't figure this out, is my co-host, Kelly, who you'll hear from in a second. We have a super duper special guest today, Kim Muench. Did I get that right, Kim?
You did. Thanks, Mark.
I did. I got it right. Awesome. Great topic. Kelly, would you do the honors of doing a proper introduction for Kim, and then let's dive right into this.
Absolutely, yes. Today we're so excited to talk about how to stop bailing out your adult kids and have a healthy relationship. Today's conversation is going to hit home for literally anyone who has adult children, and whether it's an adult son or daughter living at home, struggling to launch, avoiding responsibility, or maybe they're just quietly draining your peace. Our guest, Kim Muench, is the founder of the Real Life Parenting Guide, and she's a certified parenting coach. She's an award-winning writer. And this matters, guys. She is a mom of 5 adult children with her husband, and we'll hear about that. And she's just helping people create healthier communication, stronger boundaries, and respectful collaboration in relationships with kids. This is not about controlling or rescuing. And she's been featured on Fox and podcasts worldwide. We're actually neighbors. We have a lot of mutual friends. We've never officially met, but I'd love to make that happen. And Kim is the author of Becoming Me While Raising You, and she has a powerful new book called Lost in Place that's on the way. Kim, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Kelly and Mark. I look forward to talking with you about this parenting stage that nobody warned us about.
That's for sure. Hey, Kim, can you give everybody a little backstory about, how you got started in this? I noticed you had gone through some pretty strong struggles with one of your children. Maybe you could touch on that.
A high overview is I had my first son at the age of 18, and my parents asked me to leave home because they didn't approve of the choices that I was making. So I became a single mom and living on my own at a very young age. My son's father was abusive, and I managed to get out of that relationship when my son was very young. However, of course, we had to co-parent him the rest of his childhood. And shortly thereafter, I married my now husband, and we have 4 children together. So I have a total of 5. At this point, they are 20 to 38 years of age. But as you mentioned, I have gone through not only just being a young mom, but when my eldest son was 20, he became addicted to alcohol as a way to cope with his mental health struggles that he was going through. So eventually, he was diagnosed with OCD and major depressive disorder. But it was quite a journey to walk with him through his addiction to alcohol. And while he is 15 years sober from alcohol at this point, he still struggles mightily with his mental health. So back in 2016, I found out through the magic of social media that there was a thing called parent coaching. And I looked into several programs because I wanted to help parents proactively. I really wanted to help them during the teen years before they would get into a crisis situation like I went through. And I began to speak at high school and middle school and, tried to reach parents that way. And what I found was that unless parents are in a crisis situation, they don't spend a lot of time working on their parenting during the adolescent years. So I jumped on and started sharing my personal story around the time the book came out in 2021. I began to share my personal story on TikTok and Instagram, and what continued to come back to me were parents of 18 to, say, 25-year-olds. And so since 2021, I have really concentrated on helping parents of that age range. I would say I'm pushing it now to 30, so parents of 18 to 30-year-olds. And I didn't think going into parent coaching that this would be a niche or an age group of parents that would necessarily need help. But it is, because of the times we're living in, I am extremely busy. There is no shortage of parents who are struggling with young adults who are living at home and not launching. And as you mentioned, I do have a book coming out in November, really called Lost in Place, which is my version of failure to launch. Yeah, so I really think if you're lost, you can be found. So the book is titled Lost in Place: How to Motivate, Support, and Launch an Adult Child.
Yeah, so we want to have some hope that it's not too late. Like all this didn't have to happen before they were 4 years old. Like, so it's not too late for anyone, whether they're 20 or 30. So what are some of the things that no one is just honestly talking about? Because a lot of this just stays in the dark, stays in hiding. The parents are home, suffering, struggling. Kids are struggling. What are some of the honest conversations? As I've read your blog, and I'm like, wow, she says that so well. I wish I was trained to say things that way.
Well, okay, so some of the common threads of challenges that parents are facing, is that what you're kind of, okay. So sleeping all day, gaming all night, or scrolling all night. I mean, for typically young men, it's more gaming all night long. Young women, it's more the scrolling and the social media. Really escaping through just not opting out of, like, not only are they hiding when they're in that cycle of sleep, not only are they hiding from life, but they're hiding from their family, right? Because parents have a more typical up all day, working all day, sleeping all night. So they're avoiding their parents. They're avoiding moving ahead in life. They're avoiding conversations about getting a job, about going back to school, about needing treatment. They are typically using the substance they're using if they're going to escape is marijuana, more so than alcohol. And I think these days, it just, like, that's kind of the trend of what they're using, because they're highly anxious, and marijuana helps them initially. I always say it helps until it doesn't, because then they become dependent on it. And, it really messes with the motivation and has been bringing on a lot of psychosis. So there's a lot of parents that are sharing with me their kids have, they've had to take their kids to the ER because of psychotic episodes and things like that. So it's, it's pretty intense, the things that parents are sharing with me.
So what age group are we talking about typically for this? Is that 18 to 25, 25 to 30?
I would say, well, I say 8, because I really don't work with parents of high school students at this point. So they're, I would say typically we're talking about 19, if I had to say 19 to 29. It's more rare that I work with someone who has a young person in their early 30s, but that doesn't mean I haven't
That's
done it.
not a
I would
young
just
person.
say
That's not a
we're
young
talking
person.
about the 20s. If I want to just, put a cap around it, I would say we're talking about kids who are in their 20s that are living at home, or parents are financing them living out of the house because they can't handle having them in the house.
So why are we so stupid and just pay for everything and just enable kids and do all this shit? Why? Let's roll up our sleeves. Let's figure this crap out. Let's not be proper. This is a major topic that a lot of parents are struggling with.
Yeah, and this is a good question. I actually asked this last night in my parent support group. So I have 2 support groups a week online, and parents this is not just a US problem. I mean, I have parents in that group from Africa, Australia, the UK. I'm working with parents in Dubai and in Switzerland at the moment. This is a universal problem. And in my opinion, I think the major part of the problem is the information that's coming into young people. And we grew up without having daily digital use, right? A phone, all of this stuff coming at you. We might have known when our kids were teens if we were really on top of it as a parent, and I was not. But some parents were really on top of what is their kids seeing online, and, they're really monitoring the text messages and stuff like that. Well, by the time your kid is in their late teens and 20s, you no longer have any idea what's coming at them. And it's cultivated for you, right? That newsfeed is cultivated for you. So I am convinced that one of the big issues is the information that continues to come at these kids through their phone, through gaming, through, this is something that has previously, like we at 57, like we didn't grow up with this. And we were told as parents, be careful with what your kids are watching, how much time they're spending on it, blah, blah, blah. Well, this is really the first generation that has had access to this over the last decade. And we are seeing the results in part of the information, too much information coming at them, the kind of information that's coming at them. It's really impacting their mental health, their level of anxiety, their distrust with the world. The economy is challenging for young people, and they're getting that information, and they're feeling hopeless, and they're feeling defeated. So now parents will compare that. They also want to compare their kids' timeline to their own. So, for example, of course, I had my son very early, but I was married and having other kids in my early 20s. Most of the people that I knew went to college and then, got married and were having kids by their mid 20s. That is not the same timeline for young people these days, and there's a number of reasons for it. But I think parents expect their kids to be on the same timeline that they were on. And I have read that this generation is a good 5 years behind where we are at. Okay, so kids are not getting married until their late 20s, sometimes early 30s. And if they're having children, they're having children generally later. So kids are not on the same timeline that we were on. That doesn't mean that you need to pay for everything for an additional 5 years. That's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying parents' expectation of their kids in a timeline being the same as Gen X is not the case. That's just not.
Well, 2 points. One, you made that I think we grew up in one of the best times. We knew what it was like to not have any connection to technology, and now we are still young enough where we can embrace it, and whatever news coming out pretty much applied to our lives. And yeah, the kids that we have pretty much been plugged into technology since they've been born for the most part here, and it's only gotten faster. What are we exposed to? 11 million pieces of information each and every day. Then you take these algorithms, which are feeding us exactly what they want to feed us, what they think is going to, how do I say it, turn us into what they want and control us. It's not that hard to understand why a lot of kids today are suffering with anxiety, depression, because it's all based on their overexposure to information. Kelly, you were going to say something?
Yeah, I was just thinking about, how we grew up and how our parents raised us. And obviously there's something we were doing. And I know for me, compared to my parents, we gave and gave and gave it, wanted to have the best in every opportunity. And so what in that parenting style is?
Yeah. Kelly, you make an excellent point, and that is probably where I would have gone. The other thing is, I think most of Gen X grew up because we've had so much influx of information about parenting and brain development and secure attachment and whatnot. We were more emotionally available and attuned, almost over-attuned to our kids, where we grew up with parents. I'm not saying I had a very empathetic mother, and I did not have an overly empathetic father. And everyone has their own experience. But in general, we didn't have the kind of emotional support that our kids now have. And I think a lot of Gen X over-adjusted, right? We became too empathetic and so my coaching and what I work with parents on is we got to bring this back to, because we maybe received like suck it up buttercup kind of stuff, and we went to, oh, poor you, I need to, make you feel better, or we need to give trophies to everyone.
It's the trophies. That's what screwed it up. Yeah, that's it. I was going to say that.
We got to
Good
bring
point,
it back to, you can be empathetic and set healthy boundaries, right? And that is what needs to take place.
I think when we grew up, we were seen and not heard. Our voices didn't really matter. And today it's totally, or at least when we were raising, it was more, as you said, focused on them, their feelings and everything else. And then you had the whole, everybody gets a trophy. Nobody is allowed to feel any pain. And I think for the most part, we probably enabled a lot of the patterns to take place here today. Somebody said to me the other day, that our generation, had it tougher. I don't think so. When you think about the kids that are in their 20s, they grew up through some of them grew up through 9/11, they grew up through COVID, they grew up through 2 recessions already. They've seen a lot, shootings in
Yeah,
school. We didn't have shootings in school,
for
so
sure. This is impacting these guys.
yeah,
Like,
so any parent that sits there and say, "Oh, we had it tougher than the kids are having it today," I don't agree with that at all. I think these kids have been exposed to way more stuff than we have. So,
yeah.
one of the side
I
effects of that is the spill off you see right now.
Yeah, yeah. So the other thing that I want to mention that has impacted, so not only the daily digital use that we didn't have, the way that we were parented and how we overcorrected emotionally and have been maybe too lenient and not had enough boundaries with our kids. But also COVID. That's the third thing that parents, that's a third theme that they will say, my kid was doing great, socially really well adjusted, academically doing amazing. And then COVID hit and they were, and really the kids that were 18 to 25 in 2020, that's freshman year in high school through senior year in college. I know this because I had one bookend and the other bookend so this age group of kids is now 20 to 28. And that's what we're looking at as I'm telling you, like the most affected age group. These are the parents that keep coming and coming to me. So COVID, the daily digital use, that after 10 years, this is the impact. And then the overcorrection of emotional, help that we have parented with. These are the three things that are contributing to it.
My kids are 24 and 25, and I'm so happy to say off the payroll. They're out. They've got their places, and I made plenty of mistakes raising my kids, but they do have good life skills, and they have been responsible that way. They have been to funerals. I mean, they've seen suicides of friends. I mean, they have been through it. They really, really have, and it is heartbreaking. Um, and we talk about how maybe it is different or similar. I think financially is maybe one of the reasons why children are not launching. I mean, we didn't have our $100 nails and Starbucks and Lululemon and phones. I mean, we didn't have the expenses, Wi-Fi that they do either. So the cost of living, is that a reason why some are not, or excuse
Oh,
why some are not
100%.
launching?
Yeah. I mean, I think that 100% is part of it. And yes, all of those things are expensive. And as a Gen X, I would be like, well, you don't need $100 nails, right? Like you don't need that Starbucks every morning. Like, like, um, it, it comes down to choices. It comes down to parents. I know there are a lot of parents, especially Kelly, you and I live in the same area, where parents have worked very hard to provide an amazing lifestyle, a very comfortable lifestyle for their kids. The problem is they grew up in that and they haven't been held accountable to maybe household chores or the things that we had to do growing up. And so I'm not saying that this isn't a good excuse. I'm just saying it's harder to teach them in their 20s if they haven't been contributing to family and household and whatnot through the rest of their years, right? If the parents are all of a sudden like, you know what, you need to start contributing here. And they have had a lifestyle that they really haven't had to do that in the past, haven't had to clean up them after themselves, haven't had to do their own laundry. It's more difficult, not impossible, of course, but more difficult to teach that in their 20s than when they maybe were 10 or 12 years old.
I'm going to add something to what both of you said. I believe this is that today the kids, I don't want to call them kids because they're adults, young adults at this point, I think they were sold a bill of goods. The bill of goods was the American dream that's gotten so difficult for them to actually achieve, that we had a little bit better time of it. Buying a house, almost impossible, 10 times your income. I mean, for a starter house, if you're making 50,000, which, is not a lot of money, but it's not a little bit of money. The average house is 3, 4, 500,000. They're starting to come down. But a lot of things that we were able to do and dream about, they have tapped out on. So I wonder how much that has to do with their inspiration, their I hate to use the word motivation because I think it's a BS word, but their motivation in life, and maybe they just kind of check out. What's your thoughts on that?
I think that can be the case as well. But I also think there are many ways to make money now and to become your own boss that we didn't really know about or pursue.
I heard this.
There have been opportunities now that
Yeah.
we didn't have.
I heard the statistic a week ago that there's over 1 million people on YouTube making over $100,000 a year. That's incredible. That's
Wow.
yeah. So not that being an influencer or content creator is easy for somebody, but
No.
um,
As someone who does that several
yeah,
times
it's
a
a
week,
pain in the
like
butt. Absolutely. So,
Mm.
so Kelly, you were going to say something? Go ahead.
Yeah, I was just thinking, so not that there's any one way, or what should launching look like? Because when we came along, you turned 18, you graduated high school, and then you either went off to college or the military, or you got a job. And I know, there's different paths for different people, but what sort of is an expectation or a path that you can help parents to what does launching look like regardless of what happened in the past?
well, I think another thing that has become more popular, and I'm not against it, but I think this is something that has become more popular than maybe when we were growing up, is taking a gap year. And that gap year being what I see is parents, it's not a structured year and it turns into 2-3 years, right? So if parents, I think there's nothing wrong with if a kid does not know what they want to do next, to be able to take a year to think about it. But that year needs to be filled with figuring out what that, maybe working with a career coach or a life coach for that young person. Working a job, having a regular structure. A gap year that is unstructured and kids sleep all day, game all night is the thing that can turn into 2-3 years of that. The other thing is often kids, they start college and they think and they go because they think that's the next thing that they're supposed to do, but they really don't know their why. And so a semester or two in, they become overwhelmed because I think everybody else knows what they're doing and they have a track and, it just gets to them and they end up coming home and kind of floundering for a while with that. So, I mean, there's a lot of reasons why so I think what was your question? I want to go back to.
Oh, just about what launching looks like, regardless of, where they are. What's a productive way?
I think having a plan, sitting down together, working together. I'm big on collaborative problem solving. How there's a problem, and the problem is I'm more concerned about the future than you seem. I'm more concerned about your future than you seem to be. I'm not willing to, stay in this pattern with you because I love you and I believe you're capable of more than what you're doing right now. I understand you're feeling stalled, but I see this as drifting. And so how can we work together to come up with a plan where it's either, depending on what the situation is, the next step being employment or some kind of schooling, or if need be, treatment. So, sitting down together and working out a plan. Now, I'm sure there's going to be a question after this, so I'm just going to stay here.
I think what we're discussing is an adult child that's lacking motivation in their life to kind of get their life together or not know exactly what to do. I don't think any of us knew exactly what we were going to do when we were that young. I think a gap year is, I guess, okay. I mean, the first time I heard that term, I didn't even know what the heck it was, but to be able to goof off. I know what worked for me. When I was 16, I was working, carrying cinder blocks 6 days and 7 days a week. You do that. Guess what? You start to realize, I don't want to do this, but I like the money. I got to get my life together. And I honestly believe my uncle was my mentor who really helped me. I was the troubled teen, and I tell this story, I would have been either in jail or dead. And that really kind of shifted me. So do you think as parents, we were making a mistake not getting our kids to be having a work ethic early? We kind of struggle with, well, you're going to work your whole life. Don't worry about it now. And do we make a mistake doing that?
Yes, I think that the other thing that happens, so yes, our kids had jobs during high school. My son played on the tennis team, and my husband taught him how to use the lawnmower, and he got lawn jobs and did lawn jobs in between his tournaments and things. Like, he found a way to be able to make money during high school because he couldn't have a traditional job based on his sports and, that kind of thing. And that's the other thing that parents, they really invest heavily. I'm not against football or band or all of these big things, but they do take a considerable amount of time. And there is nothing like working for a boss in a fast food or hardware chain, like, there's nothing like having that experience as a kid to start to realize, I don't want this kind of lifestyle. I want more for myself. I need to go to trade school, or I want to go to college and here, just get out in the real world more. Yes, there is a huge commitment and team spirit and whatnot to being on a football or some kind of major team or whatever. But when that takes all of the time during high school, I think that also takes away from learning life skills. Parents tend to be like, oh my gosh, my kid was in band and he was so busy every weekend, and so I had to do his laundry and all the things, and they tend to overdo because their kids are busy. And yes, the kids are busy, but they're also not getting some of the life skills that they need.
Did you ever work in fast food, Kim?
I did.
What'd you do?
Baskin Robbins and Baker Square, which was a pie place. I don't think that exists anymore. It was like a diner pie place.
What about you, Kelly?
Oh my goodness, I used to get picked up from school every day, and my parents owned delis, restaurants, and pizzerias. So straight from school every day, my entire life. And even when I got my driver's license, that was the family go-to. The work ethic was just work hard. So that's all we did was
That makes
work.
a lot of sense. Yeah. I worked at Nathan's. So, oh my God, I saw so much crazy stuff there. So I think the manager there was being chased. His wife's dad was in the mob. It was just crazy stuff
Life
there. So
lesson.
it was just crazy stuff. At 16, I saw way too much stuff. So maybe that was a good thing. Or was it 14? I forget how old I was at that time.
So Kim, at what point does the support, like, oh, they're busy, they're exhausted, they're doing homework, they're running to tournaments, and I'm going to do their laundry today. At what point does it become enabling, where now we're just doing way too much?
Well, I'm going to give you the definition that I use with parents all the time. What is helping and what is enabling? Helping looks like occasional, my daughter's at work and she wants to wear this blouse that's at the dry cleaner, and I go pick it up for her. That's, once in a while, kind of like she needs help, so you do that. Enabling is when you do something for someone they can and should be doing for themselves. It's repeated, and it's typically one way. So we help each other out on occasion, especially in the context of a family, right? She might throw a dinner in for me because I'm meeting with a client, and we just reciprocate. However, the enabling is when you're doing something for someone they can and should be doing for themselves, and it's over and over, and it's typically one way, right? Like it's typically, and resentment can build. Okay, so when we're helping, when we're supporting, we're not taking away their capability or their capacity. When we're enabling, we're taking away. The more we do for someone they can and should be doing for themselves, we take away their purpose. And over, I really think that what I'm seeing with these young adults that are especially at home and really just like hopeless and not moving ahead, and things are being done for them, especially, their parents start to take over and, clean the kitchen for them because they feel bad because the kid, is kind of lost and, seems depressed. And the more they're doing to compensate, the less the kid has to opt into life.
Kim, I want you to talk to the people pleaser mom or the people pleaser dad right now, whose obviously highest value is their family. What are some of the mistakes they're making, similar to what you just said, and what can they do to recognize that they're actually making the situation not better, but worse by doing everything for them? Any thoughts on that?
So the two things that really get in the way of people-pleasing parents that I have seen, one, a fear of self-harm. They're afraid that if they put boundaries into place, if they start taking steps back and seeing if their kid can start opting more into life and starting to take on the phone bill or whatever, makes sense in their family situation, they are afraid, and there is an increase in mental health/suicide. So we never want to minimize that, but that's their fear. And then their other fear is their emotions, being able to tolerate their kids' big emotions. I think, to go back to the way we were raised, often we weren't allowed to be anxious, to be angry. And when their kids are displaying anxiety, high levels of anxiety and or anger, this paralyzes them. This like they don't know how to deal, and that just drives their anxiety up. So they continue to people please, right? They continue to do for them, because the discomfort of being witness to your kid in heavy emotions is so hard for parents that they continue overdoing.
It's such a tough, delicate area as a parent, because you're like, I don't want to overdo it, but I don't want to, push my kid to the point of offing themselves. So what do we do when you get hey, you know what, I'm just going to kill myself? How do we take it serious? How do we navigate that process? Because,
Well, I would always take it serious. Like and I know you're not alluding that we don't take it seriously, but when
yeah,
there are times when a young person will use that as manipulation, and so I always instruct parents, like, if that is something that has been said or something that you suspect, you need to follow through and call 911 or get to the emergency room or whatever. Like, you would never not follow through on that, because you don't want that to become a pattern. So we always want to treat the potential of that in the way that it should be.
is there anything we could say, to the effect of, when that comes up, like, hey, listen, I'm your parent. This is not something I've been trained to go out there and do. So if you're going to continue to say this stuff, we're just going to go out there and get help on that, and see where where they stand with it. See if when you actually, it's not like you're threatening the help. You're saying, if you're going to say this, I'm not capable of handling this, and I don't want to make a mistake. Therefore, I'm going to go out there and get help for you. Is that
For
the way
sure.
to do it?
Absolutely.
And then you
For
can
sure.
find out if they kind of back down from it, or they're just
Yes.
calling your bluff and using it as manipulation. So,
Yeah,
um,
because the result of calling 911 and or going into the emergency room, like, it generally, means hours of sitting,
mhm.
could be, a hold, and young people who have experienced that don't necessarily want to, experience that again if it's not something that's really necessary in the moment. So I do think, and it should never be a threat, right? It should definitely be a parent saying, this is higher than my level of ability to handle. We need to get some professional help. Like, that definitely should be a thing. But I think we got off track. What was the original?
We were talking about
No,
suicide for
no, not
or
at all. This is very
Oh,
important. This is,
okay. So the other thing is, like I said, that tolerating big emotions or hard emotions from our kids, parents, that paralyzes them. So I'm helping them, when I'm coaching them, to be able to learn to tolerate their kids' discomfort or explosive feelings at times. Of course, no parent should put themselves in a situation where their personal safety is at risk. Of course not. But there's a lot of explosive anger, and from especially young men, that can come at parents. And it's easier for them to project that anger, that shame, about themselves onto their parents than it is to take the steps to forward in their own lives. That can be a very precarious thing, right? So parents learning to take less personally their kids' words and actions is another thing that we work on.
That's huge. As I was thinking about the things you said before about all the things that our generations of kids have been through, another big one is the number one age for divorce is 30, but the number two age for divorce is 50. So there's a good chance that these kids have gone through one or multiple divorces and partners with parents, and just so unsettling. And I know I keep hearing the word fear, fear, fear. I just can imagine the fear inside of these young adults and just not being equipped to handle all this. So I seem like everyone would need counseling, and I know you've got 5 kids, maybe some of them adjusted really well and others didn't. But what would you say to that?
Well, I was going to share, Mark, you had said something earlier, and I wanted to share just a brief story. So, you know that I had my oldest at 18, and of course, he went through some pretty significant things in his early 20s. And there was a time when, and he was 1,200 miles away from me when he was addicted to alcohol. So I was trying to manage addiction several states away while having 4 kids. And, it was just 4 other kids under my roof. And, there was just a lot going on. But there was a time at which things were so bad with him, I didn't even want the phone to ring because I did not know what was going to come next. And I was trying to keep it all together as a mom. I'm sure parents will relate to this during the day, right? I didn't want my other kids to see what was going on. I wanted to be strong for my husband. I had a house to run, blah, 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 all the things. And I would not allow myself to really get emotional about Nick, my oldest, until I could hear my husband snoring next to me. And I would be laying there and I would cry. And one night, as I did many, cried myself to sleep. And I did not have a dream during that night. However, I woke up with the knowledge that I did not know why Nick was in the world. I did not know what he might have to encounter. I knew at that point that I couldn't control it. Like, I knew I had no control over whether he was going to drink, drive, all, the different things that were going on in his life. But I knew as a parent that I loved him enough that I would not do anything. I was going to filter all of my decisions about Nick through whether or not it was going to contribute to his self-destructive path or not. So, for example, he was in jail a number of times. I did not bail him out, even with him calling and crying and, Mom, this is not who I am. And please, I can do so, so much different and blah, blah, blah. It was a very difficult time as a parent, but he will say today at the age of 38 that is in part what, got him to sobriety, is that I did not bail him out, that I did not give him money at times because I knew that money, whether he said it was going to go to rent or something else, was going to go to, alcohol. And I was not going to contribute to, it was extremely difficult to watch him be on a path of self-destruction, but I wasn't going to contribute to it.
The leaving him in jail had to be one of the most difficult decisions you could ever make for yourself there in the short term, but in the long term, look, it actually paid off because he had time to reflect and realize that nobody's going to bail his ass out. So, wow.
Yeah, it was one of the hardest things. And
Yeah.
obviously, you can start thinking about as a parent, like, what did I do wrong that he's in jail? And he did, like all of the things. I did not. Many parents get stuck in that, like, what did I do wrong? I feel like a failure as a parent. Yes, I was accountable to definitely some choices that I made along the way that likely contributed to the situation. But it wasn't going to serve me or my son to sit in that muck. So I really was concentrated on how can I make this situation productive. I can't do for him his work, but what can I do as a parent?
So that's a decent mindset that you sat there and said, I feel bad for everything happening. I do feel guilt, and we all do as parents when things don't go right. But you thought it through and said, if I do this, this is going to enable, or this is going to set him back. What do I need to do? What is the best me that I could bring in this situation that will help him grow as a person, as opposed to you solving his problem only to create another problem down the road. So that's profound knowledge right there. So thank you for sharing that. That's big.
And that was a revelation for me when I realized as adults that I was not my kid's savior. And it was just a mental shift and a release going, I can't control it. I can pray, I can be here for wisdom, but I'm not here to save them. And when we think about when we were early teens through, mid to late teens, we probably made a lot of decisions our parents didn't like or approve of. And so we have to give them some grace to kind of become who they are too, but without the enabling and also having the boundaries.
Okay, so here we go. We got, when they're younger, that's the time to really work on their mindsets. Let's say we didn't do a great job of that. Now we got a mess on our hands. I'm a parent. I got somebody who's home, has no motivation. They're playing games all night long. They're emotionally unavailable. They barely show up for dinner. They're psychologically abusive. Any of these or all of these, what does that parent do?
That is that is the typical avatar of who I work with, I would say. Sometimes, it doesn't have to take, well, I talk about the three things that parents control. The three things that parents control in this type of situation is how they're showing up in the relationship, what they're willing to provide at this point because their son or daughter is not a minor, and how they're responding to their son or daughter's actions and words. All right, so these are the things that parents control. And there are 4 C's that I talk about in how to show up in that relationship. Number 1, clarity. Where do you stand on things? How do you have to become very clear as a parent. Can't be wishy-washy about what you will and won't support. So clarity. And parents sometimes think they're clear, but even between 2 parents, the messages can be wishy-washy, which continues problems, right? So getting parents to be working together, and I work with a lot of parents who are divorced, which can be difficult to get 2 parents to be working on the same page. But anyway, the 4 C's: clarity, calm. Even when their son or daughter is explosive or is, falling apart in some way, the parents need to stay calm. So we work on that. Third, confidence. A lot of these parents have tried everything that they can think of, and they have just lost their confidence. So working on getting that confidence back. And fourth, probably the most important thing, consistency. Parents' words and actions need to be in alignment. All right. So we use the 4 C's and we work on what are the 3 things that we control. And sometimes the very first thing that has to be worked on is reconnecting that parent-child relationship. Sometimes they're so disconnected and things have gotten so dysfunctional, we can't move towards setting healthy boundaries until we've reestablished a connection, a relationship between that parent and child. And it can take time, especially if you've got a kid that's isolating in their room, right? And they're not showering and they're, all of the things. It doesn't have to take years of time. Typically these situations don't happen overnight. It's little moments in time, in relationships and small failures that these kids have that bring them to this place. It doesn't have to take years to fix this, but it does take steady, consistent connection and working on the parent's part to be able to make small movements. And this is what I've seen over the years that I've worked with parents and it's priceless to them when they have reestablished a connection with this young person and they do show up at dinner maybe 3 out of 5 nights a week, or they do take that shower without being prompted 8 million times, or their room starts to get cleaner and they take those dishes out of the bed space or whatever. Here's the other thing I've seen: small, incremental, positive movement builds bigger steps. So while it may seem very slow in the beginning, it then does gain momentum with, again, the parent consistently showing up calm, confident. Parents are the emotional leaders in their family. They are also the emotional barometer. So the temperature is taken, especially I found for myself, if I was in a really stressed out, anxious headspace, all of my kids could feel that, right? They know when you have your plate full and cannot take another, and they act out because you are the parents need to take care of themselves so that they are in a reasonable headspace and can be emotionally attuned to their kids. They count on us. I don't care if they're 2, 12, 22 years of age. So parents taking care of themselves is also another really important, strong message that I say to parents. They often get so stressed out, so invested in their kid and where their kid's at. If the kid's depressed, they're depressed. They're so emotionally attached to that child that they're not taking care of themselves. And when parents start to reinvest in themselves while also building the connection with their kids, that also helps the situation.
Wow, so much powerful stuff in there. And it's so true. When our kids see us thriving, it makes them want to rise up and thrive. But if they see us home crying, stressed, depressed, they get afraid because they're like, why is mom or dad, angry or stressed or depressed? But when they see you, get up, get dressed, go out and, be productive, take care of yourself, it's definitely important to set that good example. What would you say to the single mom who has an adult son living at home that is abusive in some way, whether it's bullying or verbally abusive, and she's living in her home, walking on eggshells, living in fear with this, adult man-child living in her house?
Yeah, I think that a lot of the work that I do, whether it's a single parent or a married couple or whatever the situation is getting to a place of partnering or collaborating. I would say to this mom, you need to find a time when you're not in the midst of a tense moment with this kid, right? When the emotions are in a reasonably calm place, to say there's a problem. And the problem is I'm feeling unsafe in my home. I'm unwilling to continue to live this way. Would you agree that sometimes this house is a very uncomfortable place for us to be together? You want to invite that question that brings in yes, hell yes, from the kid. So the parent needs to think about, what is the question that I need to ask that would bring him into the idea that yes, this is a problem for both of us. And then the third part of that framework is, how can we work together to find some solutions for this problem? And I'm under no delusion that a 20-something who's angry at his mother and life in general and, just as being a bully is going to say, gosh, Mom, how can we fix this? I'm not under that delusion. The whole point of this exercise is to begin to invite them into finding solutions, because parents are banging their head against the wall trying to fix the problem themselves. They're adults. They want to be treated like adults. We have a problem in this house. This is the problem. How can we work to solve the problem together? And I won't go into the entire framework, but essentially what I would say to this mother is finding the right time. And it may take more than one conversation to say, we have this problem. This cannot continue. And let me just say, every parent that I work with says, I refuse to throw my kid out of the house. Which we all know would be the ultimate thing, right? That would be the ultimate consequence. If it was like, listen, I'm not going to live with someone who I feel physically threatened by and emotionally abused by. You need to find some place to live. But every parent I talk to says, I'm not willing to do that. Well, like I said, you either live with something, right, that you live in a situation you don't want to live in, and you lose your power, your personal power as a parent. You've given that over to this young man in your life, which is not okay. That's your choice. You have one choice. The second choice is, you have to leave and find somewhere else to stay. And again, parents are opting out of that choice. And third is, how can we solve this together? How can we work on this together?
How important is it if you say something, especially with adult children, it's not a false threat, that you follow through on what you're saying?
How important? It's incredibly important.
Does that fall under that consistency, or no?
Yes.
In other
Absolutely, your
words,
words
don't make up stuff that you're not gonna follow through on because it
100%,
sounds like a
100%,
good
and so we
soundbite.
talk, parents and I talk all the time about, okay, what obviously consequences this is the problem in part too. We were all, and I think this was the right way to parent, but we were all taught we have to give a logical consequence. When kid does this, you need to have a logical consequence. We all understand, though, when you get somebody in their 20s and they're adult living in your home, that what consequence can you give them? Especially if you're unwilling as a parent to say you need to go elsewhere. Okay, so this is the problem. This is why the third option and what I work with parents on that has been working is partnering with. It takes some time for young people to understand my parent is not going to fix this for me. My parent continues to be unhappy with the situation at home, and they are inviting me in to find the solution to the problem. And it can get there. It takes practice and it takes consistency on the parent's part to not give up. Well, this didn't work. Like trying to have that conversation 2 or 3 times, and the kid's like, I don't know, I don't care, I don't care, and the parent giving up then on the idea of partnership.
So you're saying keep the message consistent as long as as long as you need to, and sooner or later they're either gonna come around or they're gonna do their own thing, for the most part?
No, I get everything that you're saying, Kim. And if you're listening to Kim and you're like, wow, I wish I could say it the way she says it. That's so powerful, so amazing, so good. She's had a lot of practice, but go and read her blogs and get her books. As I'm reading, I'm like, wow, that language is so good. Kim's been doing this for a minute. So if you feel like I can't say it as well as she does, go look at her blogs and all of her content. It is so good.
Thank you.
What was the one show with the nanny she used to go in? What was she
Oh,
doing? What was that
oh
show?
yeah. And she comments on my stuff at times. She has
Okay.
Oh,
commented on my
Didn't she used to
Instagram.
do something like that where she would go in there and kinda navigate things?
Yep,
So,
super
yeah,
nanny, super
okay,
nanny. I don't know
yeah,
that super nanny and I 100% agree on how to approach things. She has definitely made some comments on my videos at times, though, and
that's
I
pretty
think it's
cool.
interesting that she has.
Yeah, that's very cool. That's awesome, so
so adult children living at home, paying rent. I mean, is there some sort of when you talk about a plan, like, okay, you're gonna pay $100 this month, $200 next month, and eventually, we'll get you.
Okay, here's what I find. Kids want to, and I say this right. Emerging adults want to be treated like adults, unless it requires them to be responsible or to be contributing, right? That's what I'm hear a lot, right? They want all of the perks of being an adult, but none of the responsibility. And that's not okay. There is a time at which maybe it's after college if they come and live at home. Every parent has to figure out what makes sense for them. But I do believe there needs to come a time, and I create with parents often something called a family living agreement, which is parents deciding what are the 1 or 2 non-negotiables, that things that I'm not willing to be flexible on for you to live in the family home, and where can I be flexible, and sitting down with that young person to look at what it looks like to live at home as a post-college grad or as a 22-year-old who's working full-time or whatever it is. And when it comes to rent, parents, they have their shouldn't I do this? I make the suggestion of it's important for young people to get in the habit of making a monthly contribution or sometimes a smaller weekly contribution. And if parents decide that they want to put that in a separate account and kind of hold on to it and gather it for an eventual security deposit and couple months rent for that young person, that I think it's a forced savings type of situation. Now, parents can use that money if they want to, but most of the parents I work with that charge rent will decide to put that in a separate account, and they may or may not let that young person know.
and I think that's a wonderful thing to do. What is the fair amount you should be let's say your child's making or adult child. I don't know why I keep saying child. It's so hard to get away from that.
I know. My kids will always be my kids, even though they're 20 to
Yeah, kids, when
38.
they come home, they're always going to be children to, because when they're out in the world, they have all their masculine and feminine energy up just to navigate the world. So it's nice to come
Mhm.
home and be a kid. But what's a fair amount? I mean, let's say kids making, I don't know, $1,000 a week. Okay. What would you say is a
I
fair
would say
amount?
that the parent and child should talk through a percentage of what their income is as opposed to a certain dollar amount, because kids sometimes have more hours one week than the next week. And I often encourage parents to go to weekly as opposed to monthly, because what I find more often than not is if it's a monthly rent of, say, I don't know, 10% of your income, or even if it's like, I don't know, $300-400. Let's just say it's that. Um, More often than not, these kids, they're buying Starbucks, they're doing stuff online, they're whatever, and that day comes of that month and they don't have it. So the smaller amount weekly, again, gets them in that habit of, I need to contribute. And parents often, if it's late, it's this X amount late fee, $10 a day, whatever, that kind of thing. And so, again, sometimes the first thing, depending on the quality of the relationship between parent and emerging adult, you have to work on strengthening that bond a little bit more before you can go into, we're going to set all these boundaries and this whole family living agreement up. And it doesn't have to take long, but it has to be sincere and genuine on the parent's part to reestablish a connection with their kids.
So what do you do when a kid misses a payment? I mean, I feel like it's speaking of Jersey, it's the shakedown money. You're shaking your child down for money, and it's protection money. What do you mean? It's my protection. Yeah, protecting you from me. So pay up. So kind of.
Well, I don't think that, I mean, maybe that tactic will work in the short run, possibly, but it also, we're always trying to balance um, having a decent relationship with our kids while also holding them to healthy boundaries. So it's intricate, but I see it can be done. And again, it has everything to do with parents not being in a position of like, I'm the parent, you're the kid, you need to listen to me. But I'm coming up alongside of you at this point. I'm parenting with you. I am not parenting over you.
And I think that's a really good point that a lot of us struggle with because that's not the way we were brought up. Like I said earlier, seen and not heard was our generation for the most part. So I remember after dinner, my dad be reading the newspaper. I go to change the channel. Can I change the channel? No. He said, I says, why? He says, because I'm listening to it. And I was like, okay. So I couldn't do anything there. So he would read the paper and listen to the TV. We had no rights. So
Yeah. And I understand that. And a lot of parents now have that attitude, and you will see their comments on my video at times, like, I'm the parent now. So a lot of those young people grew up and became parents, and it's my way or the highway still. And those are the ones that are typically, I don't want to say cut off, but have estranged relationships when when their kids do leave home, they're done with it, because we're no longer in a society or a culture that just because you're the parent, you deserve the respect. In order to get respect from your kids, it has to be a mutual back and forth, and agree, not agree. But I have always worked to treat my kids respectfully, and I've received that back from them because I have treated them in a way that was respectful. I have not minimized or made them feel as if I were superior in any way.
So running into the room it's 2:00 in the afternoon and they're been up all night and saying, clean up this room. It's a pigsty and, you need to get a job. You need to start paying rent. Probably is not going to work too well.
Well, it might gain some short-term compliance at the cost of resentment and anger and a disconnected relationship with your kids. So I am not here to tell you become friends with your kids and go the other way, become this permissive parent. I'm telling you that alongside of trying to have a decent relationship with your kid, you also need to hold healthy boundaries. But you don't have to be an asshole parent, excuse my language, in the process of that. You don't need to be. It's not necessary. And in the long run, it's not going to create a good relationship with your adult child.
Yeah. I know the dynamics can get complex, especially with 5 children and then a husband. The biggest reason for second divorce is a blended family. So while you're having these dynamics with 5 children, how are you protecting your marriage?
Oh, are you personally? You're asking me, like, how do
Yeah.
you?
So you're managing the 5 kids and all their personalities and trying to get them
Yeah, I
launched
think
and
the biggest challenge was, and my eldest son's father did pass away many years ago from alcoholism, and so that was probably most difficult for me to navigate. Well, he was growing up, my oldest was growing up, because my husband saw things very differently, and we had 2 different ideas of, first of all, it was the oldest kid in the family. Um, it wasn't his son. And so it put me a lot of times in kind of a precarious situation because I love my son, he's my son, while also wanting to respect, my husband and his thoughts on it. So it was a little bit more challenging then. I would say when it comes to the 4 kids that we have together, my husband definitely deferred to me as a parent. I'm not saying he didn't have his thoughts on it, but I was definitely the main person and the main parent, and what I felt was the right step to take, he typically always backed on. Um, and we're really fortunate. Well, each of my kids is my oldest has had his challenges and whatnot. My second son is a Catholic priest, so we have like this very huge variety of of and trying to adapt to, again, who our kids are, as opposed to who we want them or maybe want and needed them to be at some level. Where I'm always always trying to respect their path, and not run my own agenda through that. And I think parents often do that. They have very set expectations, and life paths that they want their kids to take. And when those kids deviate from that path, it's an adjustment and sometimes a grieving process for the parent.
So I just want to touch on a point here, Kel. I know you wanted to say something that you had just said, Kim. Your husband took a role of supporting your decision. How many times do you notice in a blended family where there is a troubled adult child that, let's just say, the weaker of the parent, or the what's the word I'm looking for? The real parent. I don't know what's the word I'm looking for there. Is struggling, so they defer to maybe a more authoritative person. So in other words, let's say a woman's having trouble with her son. She gets married. The stepdad comes in and is forced in a situation to go out there and be the disciplinarian. Does that work? Or is it better to support like you went through?
Mm-hmm. I think it's much better especially if we're talking about like an emerging adult child and a step parent situation, unless that step parent has established a really good connection with that kid and they have a overall fairly healthy relationship, then I think that step parent can step into being part of the disciplinary team with the biological parent. But if they don't have a real strong connection and they come in and try and be that strong hand, I think their role in that part is to support the biological parent.
That's a great point. That's a very important point too. So.
And I would say that my husband, we got married when my son was 4, and my husband obviously was involved in the bulk of his life. But he always took second, he definitely wanted to take second to my son's biological father. I think But again, I think especially during the teen years, my husband and my son peacefully coexisted with a lot of me trying to buffer things in the middle. So many parents probably can understand this position.
Okay, I have a question. It's a personal question. Can a parent of an adult child be the child's friend and the child's parent at the same time?
I think that works better once they're established outside of the home. Does that make sense? Like, I have 4 sons, none of which live at home, and I would say I have a good friend relationship with them. I would say friend is first, parent is second in the
But what about
relationship.
at home? What about at home?
I have a daughter that's at home still, and I think we get along really, really well, but I think I'm still more in a parent role with her because she's 20 and goes to college, and she will be out on her own. Uh, but I think while they're still at home and while she's still in this phase of her life, I'm more the parent than the friend. Like, she's turning 20. She's turning 21 in a couple of weeks, and I would not be the parent that's going to go out and have some crazy party with her. Or, like have some, first of all, that's not who she is, but let's just say she was. Let's just say she was really looking forward to
Not gonna go out and do shots with your daughter
No,
at Billy Bob's? Billy
no,
Bob's? No? Okay.
not going to do that. And I'm the parent in that case, right? Like, have fun, but keep, it's important to keep your head, on straight. And I'm not going to be right there with you doing shots.
Yeah, I mean, no healthy parent wants to push their child away, and we could do a whole other episode on estrangement. I always like to let love win. That's kind of one of the barometers that I like to live life with, of how can love win in this situation. So is there a way to have like loving consequences without feeling like you're always negotiating, and get to a place where you can have that kind of a relationship?
I think there is. How you get there takes, a number of steps, right? And that is what I work with parents on, is because parents also, there has to be a little bit of an emotional detachment from our kids being a reflection of who we are and how we parented. When you can take a step back and look at your son or daughter as a distinct, unique individual that you have helped guide, that you have helped raise, but who they are is not a direct reflection of you, that's when you can, love and appreciate them for their unique individual being, and not look at that as that's part of me. I don't know if that answered your question, but I do think it's possible.
That overparenting really is not healthy, and says more about the parent than the child who's parenting from a place of fear or control or loneliness.
The question is, do parents mistakenly keep their kids around longer because it's self-serving, because they're afraid to be empty nesters? And if that is a mistake, how do they, ultimately our job as parents is to prepare our kids for the world as much as possible. And then when they fall, to pick them up.
Yeah. Do I think that happens? Do I think that sometimes parents subconsciously stay in a dependent, or allow dependence to go on longer because they're afraid, or they don't want this chapter of their life of active parenting to be over? Yes. Yes, I think that is the case. I think that can happen. As someone who, after 5 kids and, having kids around the house way longer than I didn't have, right? I can say that I'm so glad that I have the work that I do now, because I've always loved being a parent, and now helping other parents gives me a purpose. And if I didn't have this purpose, I might really struggle with my daughter or my youngest eventually moving out of the house, right? I can see where parents can be sad about the idea of, this part of their life, because you invest so much in it, being leaving you and, being gone. I think it happens. I think that it can certainly be worked through. I think there's some grief that goes along with it. And I think, yes, that it is detrimental not only to the parent, but to that young person when they are doing that.
So if we do our job right, they're supposed to be wanting to leave, basically, for
Yeah.
parenting.
I mean, I think that's,
Okay.
yes. I think
And
that,
it's understandable that, family is the highest value. And if your family is your highest value, you don't want to give up your highest value because you feel like you're losing your identity. So what you picked up was a whole nother, like you said, you had something to fill your passion, serving others, which, we all do here for the most part here. So
yeah. Yeah. And I think those parents could become, with some work, great parent coaches, because I think there's a lot of young parents that didn't have a good example of an upbringing, or maybe don't have a parent that they can turn to when they're raising their young children. And I think mentoring young parents can be an amazing, not that I work with parents of young kids, but I think that can also be an amazing contribution to life.
So as a final question, as mom of 5 adult kids, if you could give hope to that mom or dad, married or single or blended out there, what would be some final words of hope and encouragement to people struggling with adult children at home?
Well, I'm going to share with you the last page of the book that I wrote called Becoming Me While Raising You. It's a quote that really was downloaded to me. I think I was vacuuming on a Saturday, and it's an excellent quote, and it's something that I think every parent should think about, and that is, our children come through us, not for us, except for the lessons they reflect to us during their journey in an effort to grow us up along the way. So my question to parents to think about is, what have your children taught you about life? Beyond the fact that you don't have any control a lot of times over their life and where it goes, but they've taught you, my children are my greatest teachers. And I want parents to really think about, they often think that they're in the role of being the teacher, but I really think that our children teach us as much, if not more, and help grow us up way more than, we impart on them. So what has your child taught you about life and about yourself?
that's awesome. Hey, Kim, can you let your child out of the closet tied up, please? Okay, they're crying.
That's my puppy dog.
That's your puppy dog, guys.
Well, that
Sorry,
was
I
a
couldn't
great
resist.
finishing wrap. That was just so poignant and powerful. And just want to speak to the audience and say, if this stirred something in you today, if you got some clarity, some conviction, yeah, bring the dog in.
Yeah, let's see the puppy. For those of you not on, oh my gosh, look at that.
Her name is Mayhem. The other one is Mischief, but this is Mayhem. She's causing mayhem at the moment.
Well, she's living up to her name. Very good.
Yes. Well, we want to speak to the listeners and let you know you're not alone. If this episode is for you or another parent that you love, please do share this. Evolution is possible. Betterment is possible. Love winning and healthy relationships are possible. And Kim just reminded us of all of that. We can love our adult children, and sometimes that might mean disappointing them or new boundaries, or we have to rise up as adults and be better equipped to know how to release our child into the world healthy. So parents, you are not failing. Kim has so many great tools out there. If you want to learn how to have peace in your home and lead differently, definitely check out Kim's website, her tools, her books, her blogs. Kim, tell us the best place for people to find all your info.
It would be on my website, which is reallifeparentguide.com. Or if they're on social, I'm on TikTok and Instagram at Kim Muench, Parent Coach.
I always say this, that if you are here today and you're listening to an episode and it's something that registers with you, you're here for a reason. Your intuition got you here. So when does Lost in Place, I so love that name. So by the way, so when is that out, or is it out? Or what?
November of this year. So
Okay.
yeah. So it's got a minute, and I wish it was out yesterday because it's
Okay.
super needed, but it's
And what are
coming.
some of your other books? Maybe people can grab some of your other books because reading
Yes.
is always one of the best ways to shift this thing.
Yes,
What are
absolutely.
mention your other books.
I published self-published in 2021 a book called Becoming Me While Raising You: A Mother's Journey
Have a
to
great name.
Herself. So yeah, I mean, I really think Becoming Me While Raising You is really encapsulates what parenting is all about.
Excellent name. Excellent. Kelly, anything else?
Yeah, no, we just want to have everyone go get Kim's resources and follow her on social media. Kim, where should they follow you on socials?
Instagram and TikTok, also Facebook. Facebook is Real Life Parent Guide, but Instagram and TikTok at Kim Muench, Muench, Parent Coach.
Excellent. Well,
Excellent.
parents, you have all the tools you need now, so get connected to Kim, and we're cheering you on in this parenting journey.
For sure. Kim, we are so grateful to have you on the show today. We appreciate everything you shared with us, and we appreciate puppy love there too, also, for sure. Gang, go check her out. Go check out her social. Go check out her books. You're just literally one step away from turning your entire life around. If you're struggling with an adult child, you can do it. Kim has turned around many, many, many people here.
Mhm.
That is about it. Thank you
Thank you.
all for tuning in today. Hopefully, you all got something out of this that you could apply to your life and live a healthier lifestyle. Thanks for tuning in. We will see you all on the next episode. Don't forget to like, follow, and subscribe. Bye bye.